Students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison attended a workshop on paper casting by Barbara Landis in the art department's paper lab. In this one-day workshop, Barbara demonstrated several methods for casting or shaping handmade paper. Students draped or formed sheets of handmade paper over objects or into plaster molds and brought items to assemble on corrugated board. Absorbent items such as seedlings or fabrics were first given 2 coats of silicone spray. The spray is used to make them waterproof and protect them from the water in the wet sheets of paper. The spray is permanent and cannot be removed from the applied items. Any multi-purpose heavy-duty silicone spray will work. You do not need to apply the spray to plaster casts or other items that will not be damaged by water. Students started by forming sheets of paper from cotton fiber using a mold and decal. They couched their sheets on Pellon interfacing. Once they had formed several sheets of paper, they stacked them between wool felts and plywood and used their body weight to press water from the sheets. The goal is to remove enough water to work with the sheets, but not remove too much water. One of the simplest ways to cast paper is to take the sheets of paper after they have been pressed and tear them into small sheets and press them around the outside or the inside of a shape. For example, Keehan placed torn sections of paper and pressed them inside a plaster cast. She started by taking a water-soluble watercolor pencil and drew shapes on the wet pulp before she placed them inside the shape. By using a brush, she can press the wet pulp into the texture into the plaster mold. Mishka used dark paper to cover the outside of a glass bowl. By using a flat brush, she's able to press the wet paper into the cut pattern on the outside of the bowl and inside the plaster mold. She did not need spray silicone in the mold or in the glass bowl. Wire screen can be used to form sheets. Thick, wet sheets of paper were placed on this piece of wire screen and then crunched into a shape resembling a crumbled sheet of paper. Barbara used watercolor pencils to draw on the sheet before she placed it on the screen.
Done.
Once the paper was dry, she slightly flattened the wire mesh enough to remove her crumbled sheet of paper. Joey brought an arm from a dummy used in emergency training and covered it with torn pieces of wet paper. Once he covered the entire arm, he hung it up to dry for a few days and then cut a long slit up one side to remove the arm from inside the dry paper. He did not need to spray the rubber arm with silicone. Some students built shapes using cardboard. Top layers of the paper were cut from the cardboard to expose the corrugated ridges. Once the silicone spray was dry, the shapes could be covered with wet pieces of paper. Marissa already had a plaster cast of a wooden picture frame. Since the plaster was dry, she sprayed water on the plaster cast so that it would not be bone dry. If the plaster cast is too dry, it will quickly absorb water from the wet paper. If the water dries too quickly, it may cause problems as you add layers of wet paper. Marissa and Barbara took turns adding paper, spraying it with water, and tapping the paper with a brush to be sure the entire piece was covered with paper and that the paper was pressed into all of the details.
Do you need another press?
No, I can look at it.
Okay.
Probably I will, though.
I've got one. Yeah. I don't know if I'm ready.
Maybe start from the.
You guys are doing great over here.
This section of the frame shows a detail of the sheet after it dried.
Okay, let me do these together.
Barbara Bradley cut a design in the cardboard and covered it with tree seedlings. Silicone spray was used to cover the board and seeds. Once the seeds were arranged on the board, she layered 2 sheets of wet paper over them and moved them to a hydraulic press to give them light pressure so that the seedlings and design would be pressed into the paper and remove more water. Barbara covered the stack with a sheet of Pellon and a wool felt. Light pressure was applied in the press,
that another piece of paper?
As soon as it came out of the press, the felts were lifted to inspect the
This is gonna be
embossing
it.
from the seeds and cardboard.
Do I lift it off or just carry the whole thing?
Let's gently look at it.
Yep.
All right, if anybody wants to
After a few days, the pattern can be seen in the finished piece. This videotape was taken during Barbara Landis' one-day workshop. These are a few of the items that were made. The goal of the workshop was to introduce students to a few methods for casting handmade paper. Paper making has unlimited possibilities. Hopefully you have gained a few ideas from this video.